The Qing Empire in the early 19th century was a realm of profound and self-assured wealth, a celestial kingdom that viewed the world beyond its borders with serene indifference. From the terraced hills of Fujian, where emerald tea leaves shimmered with morning dew, to the mulberry groves of the Yangtze Delta feeding countless silkworms, and the fiery kilns of Jingdezhen producing porcelain of impossible delicacy, China's bounty flowed in an unending stream. This stream converged at the single, tightly controlled aperture of Canton. Under the imperial Canton system, all foreign trade was funneled through this southern port, permitted only with a handful of licensed Chinese merchants known as the Kohang. To the mandarins in Beijing, this was not isolation but orderly management, a natural reflection of their civilization's supremacy. European merchants, particularly the British of the East India Company, crowded into the 13 factories, a narrow strip of waterfront warehouses. They arrived with holds full of woolens, clocks, and other manufactured goods, only to find little Chinese interest. The empire, vast and self-sufficient, desired almost nothing they offered, but the British and all of Europe craved everything China produced. The result was a relentless, one-way current of commerce. Chests of silver coins, Spanish dollars, Mexican reals, piled up in the coffers of the Kohang merchants, flowing inland to the imperial treasury as British ships sailed away laden with tea, silk, and crates of blue and white porcelain. This silver drain became an obsession in the counting houses of London and the halls of Parliament. For decades, the wealth of the West seemed to be steadily siphoned eastward to settle an insatiable British thirst for tea. The economic tension was palpable, a slow-burning fuse beneath the surface of polite trade. In Canton, British merchants chafed against the restrictive system, their frustration growing with each departing silver-laden junk. They were relegated, treated as tributary barbarians by imperial officials who communicated through edicts, not negotiations. Meanwhile, from the Forbidden City, the Son of Heaven ruled over what he believed was the entirety of the civilized world, unaware that the impatient men in the foreign factories, hemorrhaging silver, were already plotting a means to reverse the flow. The stage was set not by a clash of armies, but by this profound and destabilizing economic imbalance, a kingdom of sublime confidence facing a commercial power driven to desperate remedy. The remedy, when it came, was a poison disguised as a commodity. The British East India Company, sovereign over vast tracts of Bengal, found its solution not in a factory but in a field, the lush, rolling opium plantations of India. Here, the sticky black resin of the poppy was processed into dense, fragrant cakes, packed into wooden chests and shipped east. This was the calculated answer to the silver drain, a product for which a market could be forcibly created. British merchant vessels, once burdened with unwanted woolens, now carried their illicit cargo to the edges of Chinese waters, selling to smugglers who operated with brazen efficiency under the corrupt gaze of some local officials. The poison seeped into the port cities with terrifying speed. In the shadowy back rooms of Canton's merchant quarters, and in the floating brothels of the Pearl River Delta, the sweet, cloying scent of opium smoke became ubiquitous. The pipe's promise was a transient escape from toil, but its price was the soul itself. Artisans forgot their crafts, soldiers neglected their posts, and sons pawned family heirlooms to feed the craving. A devastating social decay set in. Men were seen slumped over divans, their bodies wasted, their eyes vacant, as silver coins clinked into the hands of smugglers. The very social fabric that the Qing prided itself on maintaining began to unravel at the seams, thread by addicted thread. Economically, the reversal was absolute and catastrophic. The once ceaseless flow of silver into the Middle Kingdom now roared backward in a torrent. Imperial coffers, once swelling with foreign bullion, began to hemorrhage wealth to pay for the mountains of Indian opium. The price was a double devastation, a currency crisis as silver grew scarce, and its value skyrocketed, crippling peasants who paid taxes in copper, and a human crisis of millions enslaved by addiction. The health of the empire itself was under assault, its vitality siphoned away by this insidious trade. In the Forbidden City, reports from the southern provinces filtered through layers of bureaucracy, stirring a deep and moral outrage. Memorials from virtuous officials painted apocalyptic pictures of corrupted garrisons and desolate villages. For the Confucian scholars at the heart of the Qing court, this was not merely an economic problem, but a profound spiritual and moral catastrophe. The barbarians from the Western Ocean, once merely an irritant, were now perceived as deliberate corruptors, weaponizing vice to undermine the celestial order. The emperor's mandate to maintain harmony was under direct threat, and a fierce debate ignited between those advocating for legalization and control and those demanding absolute, uncompromising suppression. The stage was now set for a righteous and ultimately explosive confrontation. The imperial response was personified in one man, Lin Zexu. A scholar official of impeccable integrity and ferocious moral conviction, His appointment as imperial commissioner in late 1838 signaled the Daeguang Emperor's decisive turn towards suppression. Lin arrived in Canton in March 1839, not with compromise in his heart, but with an unshakable certainty in the righteousness of his cause. To him, opium was a moral poison, and its purveyors were barbarians who deceived and plundered the simple folk of the central kingdom. He immediately surrounded the foreign factories with troops, halting all trade and demanding the surrender of every chest of opium held by the merchants. The British superintendent, Charles Elliot, faced an impossible choice. Trapped and outnumbered, he ordered the merchants to comply, promising them compensation from the British crown, a promise that would inextricably tie the British government to the private opium trade. For weeks, a tense, silent drama unfolded as thousands of chests, over 20,000 in total, were handed over to Lin's forces. The commissioners supervised their transfer to Human, a beach near Canton, where his engineers had prepared an extraordinary spectacle of purification. They dug massive trenches, filled them with water, salt, and lime, and dumped the foul, treacle-like opium balls into the corrosive brew. Hundreds of laborers, under the watchful eyes of officials and a gathered crowd, churned the mixture until the drug dissolved, then flushed the ruinous slurry out into the Pearl River estuary. The air hung heavy with the narcotic's sweet, nauseating scent for days, a testament to Lin's monumental act of defiance. For Lin, this was a triumphant upholding of celestial law. For the British merchants and their government, it was an outrage, the destruction of private property worth millions, and a profound national insult. Elliot's reports to London framed Lin's actions as tyrannical, a violation of free trade and British sovereignty. The clamor for a military response grew swiftly. Lin, meanwhile, fortified coastal defenses and composed a famous letter to Queen Victoria, appealing to her moral reason, asking how her kingdom could profit from a vice so condemned in the West. He never received a reply. Instead, he received the news of British warships gathering at the mouth of the Pearl River. The righteous, uncompromising act of destruction at Human had not purified the situation. It had ignited the very conflict Lin sought to avoid. The clash of wills was now destined to become a clash of iron and gunpowder, with the commissioner's principled stand serving as the catalyst for a war that would reshape history. The war that arrived in the summer of 1840 was a confrontation between epochs. The British Expeditionary Force, a fleet of over 40 vessels, represented the brutal zenith of industrial might. Among them were the Nemesis and other iron-hulled paddle steamers, squat, smoke-belching monsters that moved with contemptuous ease against wind and tide. Their broadsides mounted modern Paixhan's guns and heavy cannons capable of explosive shellfire. Against this mechanical leviathan, the Qing deployed the martial inheritance of a bygone age, vast fleets of ornate wooden junks with fixed sails, manned by brave but bewildered crews armed with matchlock muskets and cast-iron cannons that had seen little improvement in 2 centuries. The technological disparity was rendered in fire and splinters at every engagement. The First Battle of Chuanpi in November 1839 previewed the slaughter to come. British steamers maneuvered into positions impossible for the Chinese fleet, raking the junks with relentless, accurate broadsides. Wood shattered, sails erupted in flame, and bodies fell into the oil-slicked water. The Qing coastal batteries, stone fortresses that had repelled pirates for centuries, were systematically reduced to rubble by long-range naval bombardment. The British fleet, a mobile siege engine, began a relentless crawl up the coastline, a demonstration of overwhelming force designed to shatter imperial confidence. Key ports fell like dominoes under the thunderous bombardment. Dinghai was seized. Xiamen was shelled. The British sailed into the Yangtze, the empire's vital artery, and in the summer of 1842 trained their guns on the strategic junction of Zhenjiang. The city was stormed, its Manchu garrison fighting to the last man in a futile, horrific display of traditional valor against modern firepower, with the Grand Canal, the lifeline feeding. Beijing cut and the guns of British warships pointed toward Nanjing itself. The Qing court capitulated. The Celestial Kingdom, for the first time, was forced to sue for peace on a foreign power's terms. The Treaty of Nanking, signed aboard the British warship HMS Cornwallis in August 1842, was a document of profound humiliation. Its terms were carved not in diplomacy but from defeat. China was forced to pay a crushing indemnity of 21 million silver dollars. The Canton system was shattered, with 4 additional ports, Xiamen, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai, opened to British trade and residence. Tariffs were fixed by agreement, stripping China of control over its own customs. Most symbolically potent of all, the island of Hong Kong was ceded in perpetuity to the British crown, a sovereign splinter of the empire lost forever. The treaty said nothing of the opium trade, which continued unabated. This was not a peace but a dictated settlement, the first of the unequal treaties. It marked the violent, unequivocal end of China's ancient worldview and the bitter dawn of its century of humiliation, a long descent where sovereignty was compromised, territory fragmented, and the very idea of the celestial kingdom lay broken under the cold iron of foreign guns.